People often complain about how bad modern lumber has become, and for good reason. Like this piece, it's full of big knots. Some of them have holes all the way through. And trying to find a straight board at the lumber store, sometimes you have to sort through a lot of boards just to find a few straight ones. I'm going to show you why modern trees produce such low quality lumber compared to the higher quality lumber we used to get from trees from the past. And I'll show you what we can do to get better lumber. Before we get into that, this is the part where they say I'm supposed to have a channel jingle intro I'm supposed to play while I show my logo or some little animation to... Well, I don't have any of that, so you're just going to have to imagine it's there. We'll just get right into the video. This video was inspired by a comment I got on one of my recent videos. This commenter has a house that was built in the 1930s. I think it was the 30s. It was built a long time ago. They noticed a lot of the lumber in that house is clear, old-growth lumber. The question was asked, why does clear lumber come from old growth? Is it because of the way they cut it, or is it just because it's old growth? I thought that was a really good question. Today we are going to answer that question. What is old growth? Old growth were the trees that were out in the forest that were out there since before we started cutting down the trees in the forest. The official definition of old growth can vary from region to region. Around here, I believe the definition of old growth is any tree over 200 years old. Well, let's go take a look at some wood and some trees, find out why the old growth trees produce such high quality wood, and see what we could do to get these younger modern trees to also produce high quality wood. Knots provide very little strength to lumber, in a lot of cases no strength at all. Having a knot in the lumber is a weak spot. Having a knot in your lumber can be very similar to having a hole in your lumber. In some cases, the knots will fall out and you will have a hole in your lumber. Knots in the lumber can be even worse than just a drilled hole in the lumber. A lot of times the grain patterns around the knot are not in the right orientation to provide as much strength to the lumber as regular straight grain would. But as long as you have enough solid wood around a knot, it's not always a problem. When a knot starts taking up a higher percentage of the wood, that's when we start getting problems. Especially here where we have two of them, or if you have a spike knot. I don't have any examples of spike knots here. Maybe that's another video for another time. But this is going to be a weak spot. It's not even the knot that broke out, it's that grain pattern around the knot. Now if I take a board the same size, it's clear, no knots in it. Okay, there's one little knot right there, but that doesn't count. I can't break that. Maybe I could if I really tried hard, but it's a really nice board. I don't want to break it. You find a nice clear board with no knots these days, that's valuable stuff. I don't want to break that. One of the problems with modern trees, they tend to produce more lumber with more knots in it. Obviously, knots come from branches. Let's take a look at how branches grow. I hacked the end of this up earlier this morning so we can follow the branch all the way. Branches typically go from the middle of the tree out. Before we get into this, let's go back in time to when the branch first started growing. Of course, we can't go back in time to see when this one started growing, but we are already back in time before these branches start to grow. We can already see them starting to grow. This is the terminal bud. That's the bud that's going to create the new leader that'll become the trunk of the tree. These lateral buds are the ones that are going to grow the new branches. This spring, as the new leader grows up from the top of the tree, these new branches will come out the sides, just like it did here last year. Same thing on this tree. Here's last year's leader, last year's limbs. This is the previous year's limbs. These ones are even bigger because they had one more year to grow. The ones below it are 1 year older. They are bigger because they had one more year to grow. Now you're probably thinking, yeah, but what about epicormic branching? We're not talking about epicormic branching, we're talking about axial branching. And quit trying to use big fancy words to try to make yourself sound smart. Those were Douglas fir. Same thing is happening on this ponderosa pine. That top leader and that top whorl of branches are last year's growth. As you keep going down, the branches keep getting bigger because each whorl of branches is 1 year older. Until you get down to this point where some guy with a chainsaw cut the branches off, because he didn't want those branches smacking his shiny vehicle every time he drove it past here. But that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. Back to what we are talking about. Every year, each one of these branches are going to put on a new ring, same way the trunk makes rings. Each year, it's going to get bigger. The branch goes all the way to the core of the tree. It's not going to get bigger inside where the wood is already grown around it. It's going to get bigger on the outside. Next year, the trunk's going to grow another ring, get a little bit bigger, and it's going to have to grow over this part of the branch. The next year, it will grow another growth ring from the trunk out. Every year, this will become a progressively larger branch for this trunk to have to grow around. Am I over-explaining this? Seems like I might be over-explaining this. We have one more little bit about this, but hang in there. We've almost made it to the really good part. We can see that here. The branch starts out small in the middle, keeps getting wider and wider and wider the farther out we go. Well, you can kind of see it here, but I pretty much mutilated this one with the chainsaw. Not the greatest example. By the time it gets out here, it's a big knot. If this tree would not have died, these branches would keep growing, getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. As the tree continues to grow out, it will have larger and larger and larger branches to have to grow around. The bigger the tree gets, the bigger the limbs get, the bigger the knots get. Large knots are considered defects in the lumber. Now you might be thinking, this guy is contradicting himself. Contradicting. Why would you be thinking I'm contradicting him? Why would you? This guy is contradicting himself. If the larger a tree gets, the larger the branches are, wouldn't that mean old growth would have larger branches, more defective lumber? Well, that's because we haven't yet factored in the law of, which law would that fit under? I don't know. I was trying to come up with some law that sounded like it was some law that only really smart people would know about to explain that, but for some reason I don't know what that law is. We'll just make something up. The law of, I'm only telling you part of the story so far. How about I just come up with a saying? Repeating old sayings, that can make people sound smart, or maybe even philosophical. I am reminded of the old saying, nothing lasts forever. And that includes tree branches. If we start moving down toward the butt end of the log, we'll notice the tree branches did not keep growing, they died. As the top of the tree grows, the limbs up there shade out the lower limbs, and the trees around it also shade out the lower limbs. When the lower limbs get to a point where they're not getting enough sunlight to produce enough energy to earn their keep, the tree says, I'm done with you, you lazy bums. I'm cutting you off. Then the limbs die. Those dead limbs start to decay and fall apart. The farther down the tree we go, it's a little like going back in time. The farther down we go, the longer ago. There's some good English right there. The longer ago it was that these limbs died. When we get back here, all we have is a few little stubs. As we go back, we have fewer stubs. These smaller stubs are from limbs the tree grew back when the tree was much longer. The limbs down here keep getting progressively smaller because as we get closer to the bottom of the tree, these were the smaller limbs the tree made back when it was a smaller tree. When we get back here, we're getting to a point where there are no stubs sticking out. We only have these remnants left where the tree has just finally grown over the end of those stubs, or at least it's starting to. It hasn't quite grown over that one. Down here at the butt end, I don't see any remnants of that because here it has completely grown over what's left of those limbs. If we look at the butt end, for those who might recognize this tree from another video, yes, this was the tree that was supposed to go the wrong way, but it ended up going the right way instead of the wrong way, which made the right way the wrong way. So yeah, that's that tree. We can see the remnants of an old limb It got cut off here when I cut the tree off, but we can pick up where that left off in the stump. It was positioned just right, so most of it got taken out by the saw kerf, but here's the rest of it comes out to, well, here's a little bit of it right here. A little piece of it broke away and got pulled away by the bark. Here's where the tree is finally growing over the end of that branch. If this tree was to continue growing, it would continue putting rings on past where that limb used to be. Once it passes the end of that limb, all of this is going to be clear, knot-free wood. Since this part of the tree has finally got to the point where it has cleared those limbs in here, if it would have stayed alive and continued to grow, from this point out, it would all be clear, knot-free wood. If we move up the tree, as soon as the tree clears this knot and has a chance to eventually straighten up its grain over that, there'll be a little anomaly here for a while. This part of the tree will then be producing clear wood. Then as we move up, start getting some, well, that one broke off. We still have some bigger stubs sticking up. It will take longer for the tree to eventually grow over the top of these. Then after it does that, the tree will start producing clear, knot-free wood. That progress of growing clear, knot-free wood will eventually move up the tree. The middle of the wood that already has the knots, that will never be knot-free. It always has those knots on it. But the wood that grows around the outside of that will be the clear, knot-free wood. Am I over-explaining this? Seems like I might be over-explaining this. One more little bit about this, but hang in there. We've almost made it to the really good part. If we look at the whole forest back here, these trees are just now getting to the stage where most of those lower limbs are gone. They're soon going to be growing over them. They look really small from here, but they're actually good-sized trees when you get up to them. Just like this one, the limbs are now gone. There are still some remnants of where it grew over the knots. The ends of those limbs are not that far underneath. Most of this tree is going to be wood that has those limbs in it. But if we left this to grow for another 150 years, all of this wood would be completely knot-free, clear wood. All these tall, straight trees with no limbs on them, or at least no live limbs till you get right up to the top. As soon as all those dead branches break off, these trees will all be making clear, knot-free wood, up until you get to that live crown, or where there are still a few dead branches left. See, they're bigger than they looked from over there. These trees are getting almost to the stage where they're going to start growing that high-grade, clear, knot-free lumber. Everything from here out is going to be 100% knot-free. But that is typically not allowed to happen with modern trees in the modern timber industry, because these trees are also getting to the stage where they typically get harvested. They never get a chance to produce all that clear, knot-free wood because they get cut down right about at the time they're ready to start making that clear, knot-free wood. A lot of times the trees are cut down when they are right in their prime to provide you with lumber that has a lot of knots in it. They clear cut the forest, they replant the trees. In another 50, 60 years, they'll harvest those trees right when they are in their prime to provide you with lumber that has a lot of knots in it. Why do they do that? Why don't they let them grow longer so they will produce that higher quality clear lumber? If you were to leave this another 10, 20, 30 years, what you would end up with is just a ring of clear wood around that knotty center. That little ring is not going to do a whole lot of good. You might get some flat sawn clear pieces out of that, but you're not going to get the good quarter sawn, the really good high grade lumber. To do that, you need to leave this another 50, 100, 150 years to produce a significant amount of clear lumber to make it worth it. Who has the patience for that? They harvest them at this point because the bean counters have determined the trees are now big enough, they can get enough lumber out of them to make it worth harvesting and cutting them up. And we want lumber now. We don't want lumber 150 years from now. What good is the wood going to do us 150 years from now? The timber company and their shareholders, they want their payoff now. They don't want it 150 years from now. What good is it going to do them 150 years from now? These trees are also just now getting to the stage where they are really becoming productive. They're getting to that size where they can grow a lot of new wood every year. Every year, trees grow their new wood right under the bark. They grow a new ring all the way around a tree. The bigger that tree gets, the bigger that ring is all the way around, more surface area to grow new wood. The bigger it gets, the more wood it can put on every year. And the taller a tree gets, the more length of trunk it has to grow more wood. We could cut this tree down, plant a new seedling. That seedling will eventually grow back, but it will take decades before that little seedling starts growing the amount of wood that a tree like this could grow. Just for kicks and giggles, let's take a look at this seedling. How much wood is in this little seedling? If you were to cruise this tree, how many board feet do you think would be in this tree? If your guess was somewhere around not very many, that is the correct answer. When this tree starts to grow this spring, how much new wood is this tree going to make? How many board feet? Again, if you guessed not very many, that is the correct answer. We're depending on this little tiny stem to grow new wood. It's going to put a small ring around this small stem, this length of it. Plus a little bit more for a new leader. Still, that's not very much wood. Let's say in 4 years that little seedling grew up to be this size. This tree took a lot longer than that because it's slow growing, because it's in the shade. But let's pretend that was a good, vigorous, fast growing tree on a good site. It got to be this size in 4 years. How much wood is in the stem of this tree? How much wood per year is this tree growing? How many board feet per year? If you guessed anywhere around not very many, that is the correct answer. Let's say in 10 years that little seedling grows up to be this size. We have the 1-year-old seedling, then 4 years later it got to be the size of that small one. 10 years later it's the size of this one. We have a 15-year-old tree here. How much wood did this tree make in 15 years? If your answer is anywhere around not very much, again, that is the correct answer. Now, how much wood did this tree put on per year? Or even in the last year, how much wood was this tree able to grow in that small ring, the short length of this tree, which keeps getting smaller in diameter the farther you go up? Could this small tree even be growing 1 board foot of wood per year? I don't know, maybe, but that could be a stretch. How much is 1 board foot of Douglas fir lumber worth? Especially if it's full of knots. Let's be really generous, and let's say that tree is producing 2 board feet of wood per year right now. Is that tree really getting much more valuable per year? 2 board feet, what's that worth? Am I over-explaining this? Seems like I might be over-explaining this. One more little bit about this, hang in there, we've almost made it to the really good part. Let's say over the next 5 years, that tree grows into a tree this size, a 20-year-old tree. Now we're actually getting a significant amount of wood here. We have a diameter that has a significant amount of wood to grow around. We have a little bit of height in the tree, so it has some distance to grow wood on. But it took 20 years to finally get to a stage where this new forest is starting to grow a significant or a semi-significant amount of wood. That previous 20 years before it got to this stage, that forest that had been clear-cut and replanted was not producing a significant amount of wood. That's 2 decades of not growing much wood at all. Even with all that, a tree this size is not producing anywhere near as much wood as a tree this size can produce. With that 20-year-old tree, we're growing wood around a ring this size. With this tree, we're growing wood around a ring this size. Wood all the way around that ring, all the way up to the top of the tree. The ring gets progressively smaller as you go up the tree, but still that's a lot more tree to grow wood on. My dad has a saying he learned from an old forester. It takes wood to grow wood. If you cut all this wood down, replace it with a little seedling, that seedling does not have much wood to grow wood on. It takes a long time before that seedling becomes a big enough tree to where you have enough wood to grow a lot of wood on. I think it's well known in forestry, if you go for longer rotations, instead of cutting these trees down just as they are getting to that really productive stage, if you give them more time to go through that really productive stage, wait for them to get much bigger before you cut them down. Not only will it produce better quality lumber, but you can produce a lot more wood per acre per year over time. But who has the patience for that? We're already 20 minutes into this. We haven't even got into heartwood versus sapwood. These younger, smaller, short rotation trees tend to have a higher sapwood to heartwood ratio than the bigger old trees did. This one isn't too bad, but a lot of our modern lumber comes from trees that are even smaller than this one, which have an even higher sapwood to heartwood ratio. Young sapwood, young wood in general, can be less stable than wood that has been buried deep inside a tree for sometimes hundreds of years and has had a chance to stabilize. That younger wood can be more prone to warping, twisting, bending, moving as it dries into some shape other than straight. And we haven't even got into the subject of tight grain versus wide grain. Hundreds of years old trees used to produce more tight grain lumber. Modern trees tend to produce more coarse grained wood. If we want some of that good tight grain, high quality, clear lumber, it's going to be a lot harder for us to find now, and if we do find it, it's probably going to be very expensive. The forest product industry is not what it used to be. In the past, we just came into the area, we had all these trees that took hundreds of years to grow, right there for the taking. All we had to do was just go in and take them. We don't have that anymore. We had the idea, all you have to do, plant new trees. Trees are renewable, wood is renewable. Yes, wood is renewable, but that old growth, tight grain, clear wood is only renewable over a period of hundreds of years. We can renew the volume of wood we need over a few decades, but to get the high quality wood that was just there for the taking, we need to renew that over centuries. And who has the patience for that? We could go back and start cutting more of what old growth is left, but that's not going to be very popular. It's probably not going to happen. If it takes us 50 years to go through the rest of the old growth we have, then what? We're right back in this same pickle. And that is the reality. We've just gotten ourselves into a pickle. That is if we want high quality wood. We can't sustain that high quality wood unless we grow it for hundreds of years. Now that we're probably well over 20 minutes into this, still I'm only telling you the short, simple version of the story. It gets more complex than this. There are other reasons why they do short rotations. Some of those reasons are regulatory. And old growth trees are not always full of rainbows, lollipops, and gumdrop skies. Sometimes they can be full of rot. Up in the tops, some of the old growth has some of the biggest knots. It's a complex subject. I don't know how interested people are in going deeper into it, but if this video does well enough, we could do a part 2, go deeper down the rabbit hole. Be very, very quiet. I'm hunting rabbits. We can grow more of that high quality wood, at the same time have forests that are full of big trees. But if we were to do that, it wouldn't be for ourselves, it would be for future generations. How much interest do we have in doing that? What is more important to us? Getting what we want now, or providing a better situation for our kids, grandkids, and future generations? That got heavy all of a sudden. I guess throughout the video I said we were going to get to the really good part. I think we're there. I get to go have lunch.